Back again with another vlog. This is Rick and Morty Season 3, Episode 6 or 7, I forget which, the Ricklantis mix-up. Now, I can definitely understand why the commissioner wanted me to watch this. I mean, I kind of have wanted to talk about this episode. Like, on the list of Rick and Morty episodes I would like to talk about, this one's pretty high up there. It is one of the better episodes of the show. It's not quite as good as Rick Potion number 9, which I would still pick as the best episode of the series. But, it's good. So, what is it I liked about it? Basically, this is an episode that is it's doing what science fiction does best, which is it's using this fantastical premise to talk about the present. I can't remember who said it, but it may have been multiple people. There's kind of this truism that science fiction is the one genre of literature that's about the present. Everything else is about the past. And while I don't know that that's 100% true, I definitely think there's a tendency for science fiction to be very much rooted in the precise moment. So we use the Citadel as a model for the issues and problems in our own society. There's a real feeling that we have fallen from grace, that things were once better than they are now, at least among white people. I think there's plenty of other people in this country who would say, no, things have always been this bad. On the other hand, I think there's some worrying signs of things getting worse. So, you know, but I think in that sense the Citadel works well as this kind of like partially destroyed place that's casting about desperately for ways to rebuild and how to move forward, but is still stuck in these structures that are holding it back. And in particular, there's the Rick-Morty divide, which, is pretty clearly being used here to talk about the divides in our own culture. And of course, the most obvious two divides in our own culture are rich, poor, and white people of color, and especially white, black. And it really seems the Rick-Morty divide is being used more for the latter in this episode. Because you have working class Ricks who feel resentful because they're just the same as all the other Ricks. So why did those Ricks have while they have not? And that anger helps fuel their desire for anybody who'll change things. It helps fuel that rebellious urge. Particularly, that's what the story about the Rick in the factory is about. And I love that factory. I really enjoyed the two commercials, the Simple Rick things. That they're commodifying emotions that we think of as being above that, but they're not. You can package and sell someone, and it gets done every day, it gets done to us all the time, that are, the feelings that we think are our escape are actually being packaged and sold to us. The most obvious one here is nostalgia. We think that we're using nostalgia to escape into our childhoods when things were simpler and easier for most of us. But instead what's happening is that our nostalgia is being packaged and sold to us with, at minimum, the agenda of extracting money from us. Oftentimes there's more agenda at play than that. Because of course this idea of the fallen state, the everything was better back then, is an inherently regressive thing. So there's kind of that strand running through it. Then you've got the like Morty kids, the school kids who are kind of doing their Stand By Me-esque kind of adventure. I'm not really sure that it kind of fits in as well with the rest of the stuff. I guess it kind of does a little bit talk about like this idea of like, you know, the way our schools groom people for their particular role that they're expected to have. That, you know, there's lots of talk about the school to prison pipeline, where, you know, particularly for people of color, especially black people, the schools are awful and they're incredibly prison-like, and they treat people like, they treat kids like criminals, and then kids turn to crime and then they end up in prison. You know, they don't give them useful skills, they don't teach them very well, they just treat them like criminals and inherent discipline problems, and they end up living down to expectations. It's, you know, because that's what happens when you have no real prospects, no real training, nowhere to go, and you've been told your whole life that you're a criminal anyway, you've been treated like one your whole life anyway. Why not? You may as well go into crime. At least there's a small chance that'll improve things. Worst case scenario, you end up living the way you've been living all along. You know, if school was just like a prison, then going to prison isn't that much of a deterrent because it's just like school. And of course, because we are a society of vengeance-obsessed, hateful morons, we've decided the solution to this problem is to make the prisons worse, as opposed to, say, making the schools better. So now you hear about this shit going on like in New York, where they are like getting rid of libraries in the prisons. They're not allowing people to send books to the prisoners, because, of course, a man in prison might imagine himself free by reading a book, and we can't have that. We can't have people in prison trying to better themselves. It's disgusting. But kind of tangentially related to this. That's the thing, is like, this is the one plot line that doesn't really seem to link up with the rest. It just has the kind of sick irony of the Morty that sacrifices himself. Much more tied into this is the cop drama thing, you know, where you've got I mean, it's something that there's been multiple movie versions of this, where you've got the black cop who's weathered and experienced and knows the streets and a little corrupt, and the rookie white cop who's come in like idealistic and quickly gets beaten down by reality. The problem with that narrative, of course, is it's still kind of the white guy's pure and the black guy's corrupt. But on the other hand, I mean, cops are trained to be racist. Like, that is an actual part of their training. That is what racial profiling is. So it's not really a surprise that you know, they're encouraged to see cops as their family, as almost their ethnicity, and detach from the communities that they are supposedly serving. The result is, of course, that, most of the insane number of murders committed by police officers were, white cops killing black people. Or Native American people. That gets a little bit ignored, but Native American people get killed by cops a lot. Frankly, everybody who isn't white gets killed by cops a lot, but if I remember correctly, last year the two biggest groups were black people and Native American people. That said, there have been cases of black cops murdering black people, because they've been trained to be just as racist as the white cops. Because all cops are bastards. It's a requirement of the job. So you've got that thread running through it, and of course the guy who comes in thinking that he'll follow the rules and be the good cop, by the end of it, he's murdered his partner. Just another case of Ricks killing Mortys, which is ultimately what's happening. Even when it's a Morty cop killing Mortys, it's still the society that privileges Ricks over Mortys. And that adds a layer to the Rick in the factory. His resentment is at least partially in that he feels like he's being treated like a Morty. His resentment comes from not being able to look down on anyone else. He feels looked down upon, and he wants to be the looker down, which is in itself a problem. And that brings us to the last storyline, which is, of course, evil Morty taking over the Citadel. This is the one that I have the most problems with, because that's just not how it goes. Yes, there are people who rise to power by preaching to an underclass and then riding that wave to authority, but that tends to be via straight up revolution as opposed to using the electoral process. That's how, the Russian Revolution happened. The Maoist revolution in China, that's how revolutions happen. When a demagogue rises to power and converts more or less a democracy into a fascist state, that's not how it goes. They rise to power by talking to the disaffected and resentful members of the overclass, not the underclass. If you want to rise, if you want to become the fascist dictator of the United States, you do not do it by being Barack Obama. Which is kind of feels like what Morty is modeled on, with these speeches about uniting and, working together against the people who want us to fail, and the fact that he is a member of the essentially racial underclass, and that he kind of came out of nowhere. That kind of feels like who he's based on, and that doesn't really work. I mean, okay, yes, Obama was a war criminal and a centrist, but he wasn't a dictator by any means. He had too much power because the presidency has been getting more and more powerful for decades, but he wasn't a dictator. And I don't think he was an evil person. I think, I think in the main he generally thought that what he was doing was the right thing, and many times it was. I think there are limitations to how revolutionary someone could be as president of the United States, especially if you want, to get elected in the first place and then to not get, impeached or assassinated or whatever. I think there's a limit. For one thing, I don't think it's possible at this point to be president of the United States and not be a war criminal. The military-industrial complex is just too powerful for that. We would have to fundamentally alter, the way our politics and industry are set up, which, we should be doing that anyway, but that would be something that would have to happen first to have a president who wasn't a war criminal. No, if you want to become the fascist dictator of the United States, you do not do it by being Barack Obama. You do it by being a less stupid Donald Trump. And not a lot less stupid, because fascists tend to be pretty stupid to begin with. But you do it by talking to the disgruntled members of the racial overclass, telling them that they're better than everybody else, and that you're going to put things back the way they quote-unquote should be. You talk to the people who are like, why am I poor? I'm white. Why are there, why is the president black while I'm poor when I'm white? That's not, as a racist, I know that that's not how it's supposed to work. Those are the people you want to talk to, those assholes. And you get them to sweep you into power. Then, riding on that, you consolidate, take over, etc., because you've got the actually powerful members of the racial overclass supporting you because they see that you're on the side of the racial overclass, but it's the disgruntled members that got you into the power in the first place. That's not what Evil Morty did. So I feel like that's a little bit of a weakness that just doesn't ring true to me. That he would be able to get there without, actual revolution. Just assassinating a handful of guys isn't gonna pull that off if you're a Morty, and if your main base of support is Mortys. But still, it's a good, solid episode that really does some actually reasonably daring things, while burying them in enough layers of science fictional metaphor that it can sort of get away with it, And as is always the case when you do that, the metaphor doesn't quite work, and the ways in which it doesn't quite work kind of betray how the creators see things, but it's still at least looking at some of these issues, so, good on them for that. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Check out my Patreon for early access to videos, essays, and more. And I will see you all next time. Bye!